The ultimate Nissan Skyline wasn't built when the R34 was new. It was built after Nissan had already killed it. By 2002, production of the R34 Skyline GT-R was over. The assembly line had stopped. The platform was retired. And Nissan's future was already moving toward an entirely new generation of GT-R. For almost every R34, that was the end of the story. But not for Nismo. Inside Nissan's motorsport division, engineers began working toward one final version. No mass production compromises. No ordinary assembly line. No need to make thousands of them. Just one question. How far could the R34 actually go? And this is where the legend gets something wrong. You'll sometimes hear that the Z-Tune was created from retired racing chassis. It wasn't. Nismo did something arguably even more obsessive. They went looking for existing road cars. Low-mileage R34 GT-Rs. Carefully selected donors. Cars good enough to survive an extraordinary transformation. And then, they tore them apart. The cars were stripped back toward their fundamental structure. The original GT-R wasn't being restored. It wasn't receiving a bigger turbo and a body kit. Nismo was using the existing R34 as raw material. For the R34 they wished they could have built from the beginning. The surgery started with the chassis, because adding power is easy. Making the entire car capable of using it is much harder. Drawing from knowledge accumulated through Nismo's motorsport programs, technicians increased structural rigidity at critical areas of the body. Additional welding reinforced key sections. The door openings received particular attention. Areas exposed to serious stress had to become stronger, because horsepower means nothing if the structure underneath it can't keep up. And then came carbon fiber reinforced components. Not simply because carbon looked exotic, not because it photographed well, because it had a job: reduce weight, manage heat, increase rigidity, control airflow. Every change pushed the old road car shell closer towards something far more serious. And Nismo still hadn't touched the best part, the RB26. By this point, Nissan's legendary straight six already had nothing left to prove. But Nismo wasn't interested in preserving it. They wanted to evolve it. 2.6 liters became 2.8. The result was the Z2 specification of the RB26 DTT. Strengthened internal components, racing-derived engineering, revised camshafts, heavy-duty pistons, connecting rods designed for serious load, and twin IHI turbochargers feeding the entire system. This wasn't an engine designed around one spectacular dyno pole. Nismo wanted power that could actually survive being used again and again and again. Race car thinking inside a road-going GT-R. And then came something that tells you just how seriously Nismo treated every engine. They were assembled individually, by hand, at Amori. And before an engine was allowed into its chassis, it had to prove itself. Hours on the dyno. Testing, verification, heat, load, inspection. Each engine effectively becoming its own individual mechanical artifact. Only then did it meet its car. The official number was 500 horsepower, and that number sounds almost ordinary now. Modern performance cars can exceed it without attracting much attention, but context matters. This was an R34, a platform conceived in the 1990s, re-engineered after production had already ended, and Nismo wasn't chasing a headline horsepower figure. They were engineering the whole car around the power. Because 500 horsepower is useless if the suspension can't control it. So the Z-Tune received bespoke adjustable Sachs suspension. The objective wasn't simply to make the car brutally stiff. A racing circuit is relatively predictable. A public road isn't. Circuit curbing, broken asphalt, high-speed corners, real-world bumps. The suspension had to deal with all of them. Track precision, without making the road car pointless. Then came the brakes. Brembo 6-piston monoblock calipers. Serious stopping hardware engineered to match the performance Nismo had unlocked elsewhere. But look around those brakes, and you'll notice another clue. The front fenders. Those vents aren't there just to make the Z-Tune look more aggressive. Airflow matters. Heat has to escape. Brakes need thermal management. The engine bay needs airflow management. Once again, the shape follows the engineering. And that's what makes the Z-Tune different from a normal tuned Skyline. You can modify an R34 to make enormous power. People have done it for decades. 1,000 horsepower. More than 1,000. Numbers far beyond the Z-Tune. But that's missing the point. The Z-Tune wasn't designed to win a dyno competition. Every system was supposed to belong to the same car. Engine, chassis, suspension, brakes, cooling, aerodynamics. One complete package. And the performance reflected it. The ordinary Japanese market R34 lived under an electronic speed limitation. The Z-Tune was operating in an entirely different world. Acceleration dropped dramatically. Its potential top speed moved far beyond what the original road-going GT-R had been allowed to reach. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in roughly 4 seconds. And performance approaching genuine contemporary supercar territory. But again, the numbers weren't what made it special. The way Nismo reached them was. Then came 2005. Nismo was celebrating its 20th anniversary, and at the Tokyo Auto Salon, the finished Z-Tune appeared. the final evolution of a car Nissan no longer produced. Think about how strange that is. Most manufacturers introduce the ultimate version of a car near the end of its production life. Nismo waited until afterward. They couldn't simply pull fresh cars from the assembly line, so they searched for suitable existing machines, dismantled them, strengthened them, rebuilt them, and effectively created new cars from old ones. Not restoration, re-engineering. And only a tiny number would ever exist. That scarcity became part of the mythology. But rarity alone doesn't create greatness. There are plenty of rare cars nobody remembers. The Z-Tune mattered because of what those cars represented. This was Nismo applying years of competition knowledge to a road-going Skyline without needing to satisfy the compromises of ordinary production. The R34 distilled, refined, reinforced, and rebuilt around everything engineers had learned after the original car had already been designed. It was hindsight turned into hardware. And that's why the Z-Tune has become something larger than another rare GT-R. Today, the R34 itself is already an icon. Gran Turismo, tuning culture, JGTC, street racing mythology, movies, video games. An entire generation grew up believing the Skyline was almost supernatural. But the Z-Tune sits above even that mythology. Because Nismo wasn't trying to preserve the original car exactly as it was. They were asking what it could become if history gave them one more chance. One final engine, one stronger chassis, one better suspension, one more evolution. And in a strange way, that makes the Z-Tune feel remarkably modern. Today we call cars like this restomods. Take an existing icon, strip it down, preserve its identity, then rebuild the engineering using knowledge and materials that came later. Nismo was doing that 20 years ago. Except this wasn't an independent workshop interpreting Nissan's history. This was Nismo rewriting its own. The Z-Tune wasn't born on Nissan's normal assembly line. It came after the R34 was supposedly finished, after production stopped, after the engineers had years to understand what worked and what could still be improved. The greatest R34 was built after the R34 was already dead. And maybe that's exactly why it became immortal.